Well, good day to everyone and welcome. For those of you who have helped us launch the MSD Pledge at our recent Workplace Safety Summit, thank you for your ongoing interest and of course for joining us in today's town hall. This is the first in a series of monthly virtual events, and we're creating for the MSD Pledge community to help design and help you strengthen your ability to identify and reduce risks of MSD injuries and create safer workplaces. For those of you who don't know, my name is Paul Vincent. I'm the Executive Vice President of Workplace Practice at the National Safety Council. And it really is my privilege to serve as your host for an information-packed hour and several expert speakers. Before we begin today's program, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for taking the time to join us virtually from all over this country. Now to today's agenda. After my brief introduction, NSC's North American HSE Networks Director for the Workplace Practice, Lisa Brooks, will share an introduction and overview of the key elements of a holistic, comprehensive MSD solutions program. Then, we're excited to bring you a moderated conversation led by Malcolm Glenn from Meteorite to discuss some of the specific opportunities to keep in mind when building or evolving your MSD program. And he's going to be joined by Brent Bowers, who serves as the Enterprise Ergonomics Program Manager at John Deere, and Corinne Towler, as many of you know, she is the Director of the MSD Solutions Lab at the National Safety Council. During that moderated conversation, we'll ask for all of you to drop your questions into the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Malcolm will make sure we're able to get as many of your questions as we can during today's program. We'll make sure to complete today's event before 2:30 p.m. Eastern so that we're on time and everyone can get back to their busy schedules. Before I turn it over to Lisa, however, I'd like to take a brief moment to review the MSD Pledge for any of those of you who haven't had the chance to sign it yet. An initiative of the MSD Solutions Lab here at NSC, the Pledge is the first of its kind industry call to action meant to unite organizations in our mission to eliminate these pervasive workplace injuries. And so far, the great news is that we've had more than 90 organizations signed so far, from Ansel and Genentech to Lidl and Wayfair. Thank you everyone who signed, but there's still room for more. And by signing the pledge, organizations have committed and will commit to analyzing the causes of MSD injuries and invest in solutions and practices that reduce risks for workers. They're going to leverage best practices and share learnings to improve safety practices within the organization that we're putting together. And we're going to build a culture of safety where everyone at every level is accountable for safety and health of workers. And of course, we have a bold goal, our work together, to reduce MSD risk and resulting injuries by 25% by 2025. We can achieve this. And together, our goal is to create safer outcomes for the millions of workers worldwide who spend their lives with us. Signing the MSD Pledge is completely free, and organizations that take the step gain access to a wealth of free resources to advance their safety programs. You can visit us at msc.org, MSD Pledge, to learn more and sign the pledge. And we hope you'll join us in this important work. Now, the goal of today's event is to give you access to best practices from industry experts that can help you as you build or evolve your own MSD program. For today's discussion, I am so pleased to welcome Lisa Brooks, one of the country's foremost experts on MSDs and one of the most passionate people I know about ergonomics and workplace safety. I know you'll see some of that passion today. And if you've had the benefit of working with her already, you'll know that Lisa is 1000% committed to creating safe workplaces for everyone. I'm proud to call her both a colleague and a friend. Lisa, over to you.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that generous introduction. So it is my pleasure to be here with all of you today. I am excited to share and be part of this MSD Solutions Lab. And over the next 10 minutes, I was asked to provide you with an overview of a comprehensive MSD Solutions program. And here we have created a graphic that represents a building, and we did that intentionally. These are the building blocks of a comprehensive MSD prevention program. So if we go to the next slide, I would go ahead and I would like to start with the foundation. So with any program or any building, a solid foundation is essential. So the first thing, as with all safety and health programs, you must have a culture that values worker health and safety. Now also, like all other successful safety and health programs, you must have leadership commitment and leadership support. And for a comprehensive MSD solutions program, it really means understanding what you're doing and supporting the plan you have in place for preventing musculoskeletal disorders. But I would like to spend a couple minutes on worker engagement. We all know, we're all in the health and safety field, and we all understand that worker engagement is critical to the success of nearly every safety and health program. But I would say that within MSD prevention and ergonomics, it's important even goes up another notch. The worker engagement, worker involvement is super critical to the success of an MSD prevention program, and that's because there are things that are known about work and doing work that only the workers know, that ergonomists don't know, that safety and health professionals don't know, that supervisors don't know, that knowledge can only be gained by actually having to perform work. So within a comprehensive MSD prevention program, it is super duper important to involve, to engage, and to value the input of your workers, of your employees, the people who actually do the work. So once you got that solid foundation laid, I'd like to now go to the next slide and talk about the meat, the core of an MSD prevention program. And I'm going to start here with ergonomics. So ergonomics really is, when we say ergonomics, we mean the applied science that considers people's ability, limitations, and characteristics in both the design, evaluation, and construction of our work. And when we say work and work systems, we mean tasks, jobs, workstations, equipment, and the work environment. The ergonomics portion of the MSD prevention program is really all about MSD risk, identifying, addressing, and mitigating that risk. So if we look at number 4 building block here, you see that there's 2 bullets under it. One says identify and address existing MSD hazards and risks. So these are all the systems that will help you identify risk that's already built into your operations, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in retail, whether you're in service. There are MSD hazards that your employees are already having to deal with on a daily basis. This is the portion of your ergonomics program that tries to identify that risk and then analyze, understand it in order to find the best way to eliminate, reduce it, essentially mitigate it. Now, we talked about how important worker engagement is. That's where this comes in. It's so important. Worker engagement is absolutely critical to the success of this part of your ergonomics program. It's important for everything, but it has even a higher level of importance in this component. Now, you see that second bullet under ergonomics, that's also very important. That is all of the systems that you have, that you build to prevent the introduction of new MSD hazards and risks. Now, the players involved here are likely, in many of your organizations, different than the key players who are involved in that first bullet. This is really, when I say prevent the introduction of new hazards, I always say this is kind of a stop the bleeding. Okay? We've got to stop putting water in our bucket as we're labeling out the water or the hazards with the first bullet. We've got to make sure we don't just keep refilling that with new hazards. So this is working with our engineering teams, with our purchasing teams, with our manufacturing teams, so that whenever we have new systems, new products, new tasks, new equipment, new supplies, that we do it with an understanding of how that might impact or create new MSD hazards and risks for our employees. So this ergonomics, again, in summary, it is about understanding the risks for developing musculoskeletal disorders and building systems to identify and then understand and eliminate those hazards. Now, let's move over to number 5. All of those are complemented by, unfortunately, MSD medical management programs. And I say unfortunately because, as you know, musculoskeletal disorders do represent the largest category of workplace injuries, not only in the U.S., but globally. And so these are the systems that we build in order to address and work with those employees who are already experiencing musculoskeletal disorders. And there's 3 major components. The first one is early detection, and that's partnered with intervention. These are the systems you put in place for your employees to tell you about pain and discomfort that they are experiencing. And then it's the systems by which we do something with that information. Super duper important. We take that information, we make sure that we get them to the proper medical healthcare professionals, and that goes into that second bullet. But the intervention part says we also go and look at the work that that employee is doing to try to understand what are the risks that they're being exposed to, and then make sure that we do address that risk before we put that employee back in that job, before we expose other employees, other workers to similar hazards. Okay? So early detection and intervention, super duper important. If we hear from our employees early, we can prevent additional pain and suffering of that employee, and it gives us an opportunity. It's a gift for us to take and improve our systems so no one else has to experience any pain or discomfort. Now, diagnosis and treatment, super important part. And you say that's obvious, right? But I will share with you that from musculoskeletal disorder standpoint, sometimes the diagnosis is not as straightforward as other injuries and illnesses, because you can have similar pain and discomfort. The pain and discomfort experienced by the employee can actually be the result of different disorders. For example, if you have pain and discomfort in the wrist, it could be issues on the median nerve at the wrist, but it could be the elbow, could be the shoulder, could be the neck. So having an understanding of the work that the worker who's experiencing those symptoms, signs and symptoms does, and communicating that and having an open dialogue with the healthcare providers is going to be super important to get the proper diagnosis. And only when we get the proper diagnosis can we get the proper treatment. So all of that goes together. And then returning to work. All of that, what you've done that I've shared about MSD management and returning to work will be used in your return to work. Making sure that the employee can re-enter the workplace successfully, both in the short term with the existing injury, but also long term, so that they aren't re-injured in the future. So all of those, so that's the MSD management. So those are really the core portions of your building for preventing musculoskeletal disorders. But if we go to that top of the building, you see the roof is called Worker Resiliency and Wellbeing Initiatives. And these we have found to be super effective at augmenting, at making everything that you do down below on ergonomics and MSD management better. So it's those systems by which we really understand the well-being, the wellness, the health, the resiliency of our workers. And we build systems to help make those workers more robust, and therefore will improve the effectiveness of what we're doing on ergonomics and MSD management. So if you look at ergonomics, it really is looking at MSD risk and looking at the workplace. When you look at worker resiliency and well-being initiatives, it's on the other side of how we understand ergonomics. It's looking at the human themselves and making sure we're doing right by everything on that individual, from work readiness to fitness to nutrition to return to work and the like. Now, next slide. Now, I've mentioned that each of these pieces really has different key leaders. And I want to highlight that collaboration is super important. I seem to have been overusing that word. It's very important. So collaboration, although there may be different leaders in each one of these initiatives I spoke about, there has to be coordination. There has to be collaboration. Engineering may be involved in both of those bullets under ergonomics. Engineering may be even able to support MSD medical management by helping make fixes before the employee goes back to work. So collaboration between the workers, between engineering, between HR and medical is going to be a key to a successful MSD prevention program. And then innovation. And we are just at a really neat time right now where there are just new things being developed, new technologies, and using technology in new ways than ever before. So leveraging that innovation in everything we do will actually also increase the effectiveness of our MSD prevention programs. So these add really some more power and effectiveness to your programs. So that's a quick summary. And so I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul.
Lisa, thank you for taking us through the critical components of what builds a comprehensive program. Now I want to welcome Malcolm Glenn, Senior Advisor with our partners at Meteorite, to lead our fireside chat.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to everyone for joining today. Thank you to Lisa as well for taking us through that presentation. I'm so excited to lead the next part of the conversation where we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what goes into really high quality MSD solutions programs. As Paul said, my name is Malcolm Glenn, and I'm a senior advisor at Meteorite, and I'm also the founder and CEO of MG Equity Consulting, which is a firm that helps organizations embed equity in everything they do inside and out. And I'm so pleased to be joined for today's fireside chat by two experts, and I think it's really fair to call them experts in their fields. Both of them have decades of experience in safety, ergonomics, and injury prevention. I'll quickly introduce them both, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So first up, we have Brent Bowers, who is an ergonomics program manager with John Deere, leading the continued development and implementation of their global ergonomics strategy and ergonomics management systems. He has a breadth of experience in developing systems of work that will enhance a company's safety and has experience in establishing ergonomics and safety systems to reduce injury rates for workers by 50 to 75%. And we're also joined by Karine Towler, who was instrumental in the creation and implementation of Boeing's Industrial Athlete Program, and now serves as the director of MSD Solutions Lab at NSC. She has a background in injury prevention programs, and she has additional experience working for suppliers of occupational health and safety programs, partnered with diverse clients across the US, ranging from manufacturing to food processing. Brent, Karine, thank you so much for joining. And I'll just reiterate what Paul said earlier before we dive in. I just want to remind folks to submit their questions via the Q&A box. Maybe this conversation will continue to spur additional questions. And as we've said, we'll do our best to get to a few of those questions a little bit later. Okay, so with that, maybe we can start by taking a little bit of a retrospective look at the presentation Lisa just went through. I think there were several elements that go into the creation of a comprehensive MSD solutions program. So I'd actually love to dig a little bit deeper into the two sides of the middle structure, ergonomics or prevention, and detection and treatment initiatives. So Brent, maybe we can start with you. Can you share a couple of programs at John Deere in those areas where you've seen success? And maybe a little bit more pointedly, can you speak to how those initiatives might work together?
Sure, yeah, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. And good morning and good afternoon to everyone. There are a couple of maybe foundational elements, even before we get into those left and right sides of that house, and that is really just the approach that we take to ergonomics programs should not necessarily be a standalone program. So it's not as though you kind of put ergonomics off in the corner and it becomes then part of, its own standalone system. One of the things that I found the most success with is being able to embed ergonomics programs into our other management systems, whether it be health and safety management systems or the way that we go about doing engineering projects. And so that's really, I think, where I have found the most success is by taking that type of approach. Two programs in particular that maybe that I would like to touch on. First is making sure, as Lisa had mentioned, of trying to use that culture and then also using our employees. So one of the things that we have found a lot of success with is leveraging our continuous improvement programs that get feedback directly from the operators and being able to develop projects and programs related to maybe some of the concerns that they have. In a lot of cases, we consider the employee the expert on the job, and they have been able to share not only the issue or problem that they have, but then also carry that into some of the proposed projects or the corrective actions that we find the most benefit from. With that, we've been able to do some internal sharing, and I think this gets into a little bit that the central point with the innovation and collaboration. And by getting that feedback and input from the operators on the factory floor, we've really been able to approach that very well. This is also then tied into a program that we have here at John Deere. We've had an internal ergonomics conference each year where we share best practices. And so we've taken a lot of those projects and programs, those innovations that have happened, and turned that into a database where we do best practices and information sharing. One of the other events or the other activities that we have found just absolutely beneficial, and this gets a little bit into the prevention side, and that is by having what we call Ergo Days events. And these have been around for many years. I think it was published in the National Safety Council's Workplace Safety magazine back in 2007. So we've been having these Ergo Days events where we invite engineers to come out onto the factory floor in a very concerted effort and trade places with the operator for the day. So they get to not only some of the difficulties of the job, but they get to experience it for a whole day. So by the end of the day, they're in some cases pretty worn out, and they understand the design deficiencies, whether it be a product design or a manufacturing or equipment or tool design that resulted in maybe this poor ergonomics condition. And so I would say that those are probably two of our significant successes that we have to be able to address some of those concerns.
Brent, I really appreciate you sharing those things. And I just love that you talked about employee engagement, because I think so much of what underpins work like this is really making sure that you recognize that employees can be a really valuable resource to help inform the work that you're doing that's going to serve other communities. So thank you for sharing that. Corrine, I'd love to hear from you now. How does this match up with what you're hearing from other companies that are engaged with the MSD Solutions Lab?
Hi, thank you, Malcolm, and thanks, Brent. It's funny, our notes align very similarly with a lot of those talking points as I was thinking about the things that would be most beneficial to share in this conversation today. One of the things that I really noticed, and it flows exactly through with what Lisa was sharing and what Brent just shared with us, is when we were creating the infographic that Lisa just walked us all through at the beginning of this call, we definitely had some challenges breaking out the components of a really truly impactful program and putting them in individual pockets, because really to be effective, they need to be interwoven and they play off of one another. And a successful program implementation, a successful worker experience, all of it bounces around between all of those elements. We really find the most benefit when we're weaving everything together in that way and putting the worker as the most critical component of anything we put together to implement. So that emphasis on worker engagement, finding those expert voices, identifying them, and then creating opportunities within the organization to take that knowledge and do something powerful with it. When our experts on the floor, when our workforce has these great ideas, if there's nowhere to take that, or if there's a lack of trust that something meaningful will come of that idea, those ideas can just vaporize before they even get into the hands of folks that can make a difference, right? So having engineers on the shop floor, having engineers who spend a day there, that really shows the power and the impact that can come of having those interactions. And it also really demonstrates that as an employer, we appreciate the expertise that's coming to us. And I think that's really, really impactful. The other great example that I've seen of what Brent has said, and this takes it from the individual workplace out across industry, are programs like the Ergo Cup program, right? Where you're able to find those solutions within your organization, share them across your organization, and then take it out and share it with a broader community and let others in your industry or even cross-industry solutions really get out into the communal knowledge and start making a difference and gaining momentum in that way.
Thanks for that, Karine. I love that you said workers are the most critical component. I couldn't agree more. And that actually takes me back again to the graphic that Lisa discussed. And that top part of the graphic, which was about worker resilience and well-being. Meeting workers where they are, as well as taking into account their emotional well-being and other factors that might be going on in their lives. I actually want to kind of stay on this point. So Karine, can you explain a bit about how these resilience and well-being programs would play into the successful initiatives that we've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the key themes for us to keep in mind is we've been working on MSDs. We've known that's a problem for a long time. And I think it's become pretty apparent that there is no single silver bullet. If we're really going to make a difference here, we need to pull across all of our tools and really leverage everything we know together to benefit the worker and the effectiveness of our solutions. So when you think about, current times, especially, it's become even more apparent than ever that we have a scarcity of skilled labor. So meeting those employees where they are and building resiliency physically, building resiliency emotionally, mentally, all of those ways, and bringing together that community in service for the goals of both the person and the organization, to pull that all together into one big package and make each one of us kind of our best potential selves, benefits everyone all the way around. So when we're thinking about building resiliency, we can work on both the physical resiliency of a person, and we can work on everything that we're bringing to the workforce. So with our employer opportunity to really create meaningful programs for our workers, we have this great opportunity to not just make sure people are safe and they go home in the same condition they came to work, but we actually have an opportunity to offer tools and resources to help folks go home feeling better, happier, healthier, stronger, better prepared for whatever life may throw at them, even when they're outside of work. And that's, I think, more important than ever. And we're finding that to be so much more impactful. And as the research is progressing in these areas, we're learning how things like fatigue, how things like interactions with our coworkers, how a connection to a higher goal, how that impacts not just our psychological well-being, but also our physiology, and how challenges in one area of our life can impact recovery rates. It's really fascinating, and I think really encouraging to know that as employers, we have a lot of play to build tools in a lot of these areas.
Karine, I really appreciate how you sort of take this comprehensive look to all of this work, right? Thinking about the employer as having an opportunity to help people actually feel better than they were when they leave. So not just something that applies to work, but that applies to home as well. And I also appreciate you talking about how well-being is not just physical, but it's physiological as well. I think that's so deeply key. Brent, I want to dig a little bit deeper into what sort of specific organizations are doing. So would love your perspective here too. We understand that John Deere has a strong workforce readiness program as well. So would you mind just sharing a little bit more about what the folks at John Deere are doing and how you're leading that work?
Sure. Yeah, that's something that we've been working on for a few years. We saw, and I know that industry as a whole started seeing aging workforce issues emerging probably 10 to 15 years ago, and it started to address that. It took us a little bit longer to really understand the impacts that it would have on our business. And so we implemented a program that we call our Workforce Readiness Program. It's comprised of a number of different elements, but it really began with a lot of benchmarking with some of what other companies had been doing. In particular, we had benchmarked with the Boeing Industrial Athlete Program, and thank you, Corinne, for a lot of your input and feedback related to that. We also benchmarked with companies such as Harley, Davidson, and Honda, looking at programs such as early intervention programs. And so really the key elements that we have developed as part of this workforce readiness start with an early intervention program or an injury prevention program. Really trying to get that input and early reporting from the employees as they start to experience musculoskeletal discomfort long before it has the potential to become an injury. The next element that we have as part of the workforce readiness program has to do with workforce conditioning. So as people come into a manufacturing environment, maybe last week or last month, they were working in retail or maybe at a daycare center. And then when we bring them into work, we just throw them right into building tractors. And so how do we go about getting that person ready for the physical demands of the type of work that they would be doing? And so this is something that we've began to implement at a number of our factories, of just trying to get that person more physically prepared for the demands of their work. So it can include strengthening, maybe some stretching and cardiovascular type work as part of that onboarding process. Now, there are some impacts related to that. It is going to take a little bit longer to get that person fully onboarded. And sometimes operations is a little bit reluctant to give up that person for the couple of hours a day for the first 2 weeks that they're being onboarded. But we've found some good success with that. We've also found a fair amount of anecdotal success with daily dynamic warm-ups. Now, this goes beyond just traditional stretching programs, but how do we warm the muscles? How do we get that person actively moving and actively engaged? The anecdotal part of this is that we have feedback from many of the employees that are saying, I really appreciate this. It helps me not only at work, but this is also something that kind of affects that person at home as well. And so by doing this daily dynamic warm-up, not only do we have the physical and physiological impacts on it, but it also mentally gets that person engaged and ready for some of the physical demands that they experience throughout the day. The final element of our workforce readiness programs has to do with job rotations. Now, in some cases where we may have a really long process time or job enlargement, maybe that's not necessarily appropriate, but for fairly short process cycles, or where we have highly repetitive activities, we have found good success in moving that person maybe to a job that has a different physical stressor or is stressing a different body part. And so these job rotations are that fourth element of our workforce readiness programs.
I just really appreciate that you're talking about what employers can do to help people really be prepared for the job that they're about to do. And it feels to me like it's a little bit of some work that you have to give up on the front end, but it's a really valuable long-term investment. So it's great to hear that John Deere is making that investment. And quite frankly, I'd love to see other organizations sort of make that same calculus, right? Investing in readiness now is actually going to be really beneficial for us and for our employees for the future. So thank you for sharing that. So
Brent, can I just want to jump in and share a little bit on that one as well. As you know, the experience we had with Boeing was so similar to what you've seen with Deere. as far as injury reduction, really impactful injury reduction from 50 to 75%, similarly to the numbers that you saw with that type of physical resilience program. The other really interesting thing that we found from that level of program and the dynamic warm-up activity that we did is it opened the door to receive that two-way communication with the workforce directly. So when we're able to engage a team lead or a first level manager, or even when upper supervisory figures would come and participate with the workforce in those activities, there was some really powerful communication that would happen. And again, really demonstrating that leadership cares about the workforce and values the workforce opinion and understands that they are the experts in the work packages. And then to be able to take that feedback and make changes based on what we're hearing. And there's something about a little bit of movement, a little bit of play, a little bit of laughter. Sometimes you're able to bring in some silly music, and it just engages those folks in a really neat collaborative way that opened up wonderful lines of communications. It was one of those unexpected benefits that we found that maybe didn't expect from the science, and it's hard to measure in a research study, but ultimately creates just exponential benefits coming out from that type of interaction. It's hard to put dollars on that sometimes, but I think when you witness it, you realize that sometimes that's the most powerful outcome of some of these programs.
I really love you sharing a little bit more about those successes. In fact, I think we could probably spend an entire conversation just talking about all of the really great things that have come out of both of your respective lines of work. But I actually think we should probably spend a little bit of time talking about some of the more challenging moments, because there are folks here who I think probably also want to learn from some of the difficulties that come with trying to implement some of these programs. I suspect everyone on this call has encounter their own challenges of some shape or form when it comes to MSD solutions. Brent, can you share a couple of the broad challenges John Deere has experienced? How did addressing those challenges potentially change your approach over the course of your work?
I think primarily the biggest challenge for us has been just that idea of integrating ergonomics as part of the company DNA. And really just how we approach ergonomics concerns and issues. I'm going to back up just a little bit. About 10 years ago, Human Tech had produced a benchmarking report or benchmarking survey where they had surveyed a number of different companies, and they started to develop what they referred to as their maturity model. And I think it's probably not going to be so far different than what we see with the National Safety Council or the MSD Solutions Lab Index. With that, as we look back at kind of the development of ergonomics programs as a whole, we started off very reactive in terms of, well, we've got a problem, we had an injury, or we've got this big concern that's really keeping someone from being successful in their job. Which was a very reactive approach. And Lisa kind of addressed this. And as we shift more toward the more proactive side of it, we started to see much more engagement from engineers, from factory leadership, from senior leadership. And by being able to gain that good alignment in fixing even today's problems, I think the big challenge is, how do we get in front of that? How do we stop the bleed, like Lisa said, or how do we stop those issues from coming in? It really kind of shifts a little bit more to this whole mentality of prevention through design. And I think that has been a real struggle for us, a real challenge for us. And so to be able to overcome that, we've done a lot of training with our engineers, but we also have done a lot of training with the operators, with the people out on the factory floor. And one of the critical elements that made that training successful is we developed a common language that engineers and people out on the factory floor could use together. So when we talk about ergonomic risk factors, instead of getting into things like fatigue failure theory, or getting into that level of detail, we just talk about the basics of ergonomics, whether it be with the operator or with the engineer. We refer to it as our 6 2s. Work is done either too high or too low or too far away from you. It's too much in terms of force, too many in terms of frequency, and too long in terms of static awkward postures. So as we talk about those things, the engineers and the operators have a common language that when we're talking about, well, this work is too far from me, we understand what that means. There's a context to it. And so that was a big challenge for us that we really needed to overcome. I think one of the other things, a big challenge for us has been getting some of the senior leadership engaged. And this is really an area that we have focused on over the last few years, and looking at a lot of the data analytics, whether it be injury data, risk assessment data, or potentially in some cases looking at workers' compensation data that really drive those processes. And when we started talking about it in those terms, senior management really started to understand and said, oh wow, we need to do something different here. And that really got their level of engagement. But then also internally, we have an ergonomics scorecard that we're able to communicate with the senior leadership and help them understand the status of the programs at each of our manufacturing and parts distribution centers.
Brent, I see so much resonance with my own work when you talk about senior leadership engagement, right? And finding the right language to really get those folks to kind of perk up and understand the significance of the problems that you're bringing to the table. And so I think having found some of that language and sort of a mechanism to really communicate with those leaders, I suspect has been really helpful in terms of helping you overcome some of those challenges. So thank you for sharing that. Corinne, same question for you, but from your vantage point leading the MSD Solutions Lab, how does what Brent just shared align with what you're hearing from folks?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and certainly this isn't without this problem isn't without challenge, right? If it were easy, it'd have been fixed by now. If I were to summarize the challenges that I observe across a number of different employers, frequently it comes down to making assumptions and that fear of trying the new thing. So that comes from both the employee perspective and the employer perspective. When you really think about, sometimes there's skepticism. Why is my employer asking me to do this thing? Is there a hidden motive? Is there something in this that could potentially be used against me? Why do they want to bring in robotics? Is that going to be a threat to my employment? Is this robot going to replace me? You know, all of these questions come up. And on the employer side, the same assumptions can be heard fairly consistently. You know, it'll never work here. We won't be able to get uptake. We will spend money on a solution and it's going to sit and gather dust in the corner. And sometimes I think one of the most challenging thing for just us as human beings to do is to put those assumptions aside and put some of those voices aside and really double down on finding a champion, finding someone who believes in what we're trying to do at every level of the organization, someone who's willing to give it a chance and to trial it, and then to really listen to the feedback that we get and say, all right, this worked in these areas, or maybe it let us down in these other areas because of these reasons. And then how do we attack each one of those hurdles one at a time and really work our way through it? If we believe in the solution, let's keep working towards it. Or if we get early feedback that this thing's going to flop, drop that one, find something else. Let's work together and move forward to really overcome that. And I do go back again to just saying, I think finding those champions who are willing to give us the tenacity to trial it out is really where we can get over those challenges. And as Brent demonstrated with some of the tools that they create, in a lot of ways, we can, from the safety professional perspective, we can create tools to help that progress go along.
I love that so much. I'm conscious of time, and we do want to make sure we hear from the audience, but maybe I can just quickly ask you both one very, very quick final question, and then we can invite the audience to participate. Brent, I'd just love to hear from you. Why did John Deere decide to be one of the early signers of the pledge? And then Corinne, if you could just quickly recap what NSC is able to provide organizations who sign the pledge, and then we can jump into the audience engagement portion.
Sure. Yeah. Real quickly, I think the reason that John Deere joined the pledge is Lisa asked us really nicely. No, I'm just kidding. That was part of it. I guess just the awareness of the pledge was important to us. But one of the things that we find important is being able to benchmark with other companies. And as part of a continuous improvement journey, it's important for us to understand, what successes other people are having. And so how can we learn from other organizations or from even some of the successes they have with innovations or new technologies? That has become very important to us. And so I think that's really the key driver behind it, is just being able to benchmark and being able to learn from other people's experiences.
Thanks, Brent. We're so glad to have you. So to answer your question, Malcolm, we are putting together a suite of resources across as many venues and multimedia that we can create. So we have webinars such as this one that we're participating in today. We have online resources. We have onboarding programs for organizations when they do sign on to the pledge, to really introduce them to a collaborative group of their peers who are also working towards the MSD risk reduction. We also have online educational resources, we have checklists, and we are really, really hoping to hear from our pledge community so that we can create the types of resources and opportunities that will be most valuable for those who are joining us in this effort. We have what we think is a great starting place, and we know that's only the beginning. So we're really excited to hear from our community to learn how we can best support them.
I love that. And I believe there is a link in the chat for folks who have yet to sign the pledge. I think you've just been given a great pitch from two folks as to why you should do so. So I encourage you to do so if you haven't already. I just want to thank you both for sharing your perspectives, though we're not done. Before we get into the Q&A though, we have just a couple short questions for all of you to help drive the conversation. So I think we're going to put up a couple of polls. The first is, which stage best describes your company's MSD solutions plan? And you can select all that apply. We do not have a plan. We're learning about how to get started. We're preparing to implement a plan. We have some systems in place, but we want to take on new ideas, or we have a robust plan in place, or we're really kind of all the way there and want to help share with others. So I'll give you a moment to answer this first question. Okay, so that was the first poll. We have one more. What type of ergonomic intervention is most common at your workplace? And I'll let you read the responses. Pick the one that most aligns with what's most common at your workplace. All right, thank you all for taking just a moment to engage in that poll. Hopefully we got everyone's thoughts going. So now we're just going to spend a couple of minutes digging into a little bit of audience Q&A. So maybe I can take a couple of questions from the audience before we close out. The first is a question from Sheree. I don't want to get your last name wrong. It's Shereegaus. And the question is, how do you successfully engage direct labor or frontline employees with wellness resilience programs? In my experience, we have much greater participation in these programs from our office workers who generally have lower MSD risks than those performing physical work. So I'd be curious to hear from all of you in response to that question.
I guess I'll just jump right into that, Malcolm. One of the things that I think is very important for us in trying to engage the factory workers, the folks out on the factory floor, one of the things that becomes important to that is the engagement of our frontline supervisors and the managers. When the employees see, whether it be as part of, the daily dynamic warm-ups, if they see the supervisor out there doing it, or if the supervisor's leading it, there's a much higher expectation that the operators should also be engaged in that. Similarly, just seeing people reinforce that message. Say if a department manager is talking to their operators about the early intervention programs and encouraging them to report the minor musculoskeletal discomfort, that goes a long way. And so employees know and see what's going on with their factory leadership, and if they have that support, then we've seen a greater level of engagement and participation.
Yeah, Brent, I would agree with you. Certainly both you and I grew up in union represented environments, and having that ability to really engage and to keep that workforce, the touch labor workforce in mind when programs are designed has been really critical. Also, just making it pleasant to engage in these types of programs. If we're going to go out and invest all this into our workforce, why are we trying to do something that isn't fun or isn't appealing? If we're going to do it, let's make it effective, let's make it engaging, and let's make sure it's designed for the target workforce in this case.
And I would add that timing and messaging is going to be really critical. So sometimes companies engage in some of these types of programs because the systems and addressing the hazard in our workplaces, it's difficult, right? You have to look at the jobs, you have to identify the risks. So it's easier to say, why don't we do a kind of a stretching program? And the message subliminally or subconsciously that can be sent to employees is that, that you're the reason that you're getting hurt because you're not ready for work, or you're not in the right shape, or you're not. So if the company, the employer, shows visibly how they're committed to identifying and resolving risk, and then asks the employees to be a partner in their overall MSD solution prevention initiatives and say, yes, we're committed to identifying and mitigating the risk that's in our facilities. Can you partner with us in this whole program, this whole initiative, and participate? And then exactly how Corrine said, and then make it fun, for heaven's sakes. So I was in one facility, and they each department had rotated who got to choose the music, and that music was piped through the entire organization. So it was kind of funny to see the diversity in music genres that was played week to week. So I would say considering all of those things, but we do have to be careful on the timing and the messaging, even if it's not intentional, that comes along with some of those things.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, all of you, in response to that question. Brent, a couple of people have asked for you to repeat those 6 twos that you mentioned, that common language. I think folks are super interested. If you wouldn't mind resharing, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I was trying to drop a little slide into the chat, but I couldn't find a way to do that. But yeah, the 6 twos that we use is work that is too high, work that is too low, work that is too far away from the person, too much in terms of force, too many in terms of repetition and frequency, and too long for static awkward postures or contact stress. So too much, or sorry, let me just state that again. Too high, too low, too much, too many, too long, and too far. So those are those 6 twos. Yep.
Thank you so much, Brent. I think people really latched on to that. So I'm glad you're able to help them take away exactly what you've been doing in the context of your work. Well, listen, we are almost out of time, so I suspect we could continue to take all of the great questions that you offered up, but we want to be conscious of your time. So I think we'll end the Q&A there. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for submitting your thoughtful questions. Apologies that we couldn't get to more. Thank you to Corinne and Brent and to Lisa for your thoughtful answers. And before we close, I just want to pass the mic back to Lisa, who's going to share a little bit more about some MSD Pledge resources, as well as some information on some upcoming events. So thank you all again for joining. And Lisa, I'll turn the mic back over to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Malcolm. That was quite a informative panel. So, and thank you for hosting the Q&A or emceeing the Q&A. So, but before we go, I would like to reiterate what Corinne actually referenced, is that there are a lot of resources that are available to everyone. These resources are meant to be tailored to you in the business community, and it targets diverse audiences from CEOs to employees. One I'd like to highlight that we just released is a resource called Equitable Solutions for Musculoskeletal Disorders. Who would have thought that would have been the hard word in that sentence, right? But a call to action. And it's really a resource that helps you as an organization be attuned to individual and systemic factors that contribute to musculoskeletal disorder and musculoskeletal disorder risks, and takes an inclusive approach to address them. And it can help your company make big gains in reducing these injuries and improving health equity, leading to a healthy workplace. So this is a step-by-step guide that will help you get started. So in addition to resources, and you see a lot of them here on this slide, we do have several of events planned that your company is welcome to attend. And again, these were referenced earlier in the discussion, but I'd like to highlight that every month we do have new member orientations. The next one is scheduled for July 28th. We have them scheduled, as you can see, all the way through October. And then we also plan on hosting monthly educational sessions and events with leading experts like we did today, speaking on topics related to musculoskeletal disorders and MSD prevention. And the next one is scheduled for Thursday, August 11th, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So we look forward to having you attend many of those events. And we are very excited and hopeful that we get to see you in September at the 2022 NSC Safety Congress and Expo, and that will be held in San Diego, California. Not a bad place to visit. So we look forward to catching you at one or many of these upcoming opportunities. So I'll turn it over now to Paul to close.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the Q&A. Thank you for the panelists. As we wrap today's event, I'd like to encourage you all to visit nsc.org/MSD Pledge to learn more. And if you haven't done so already, please sign the pledge and become part of this growing community. Thank you all for your continued support. We hope that you found today's session educational, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming events. And with that, we'll close the event for today. Thank you very much.